Okay, where did we leave off? Do you remember? What did we cover a little bit last week? The Leah and Rachel saga.
Yeah.
We have kids starting to be born of the tribes of Israel, which is kind of cool to start seeing. Now I put them up here because it's kind of hard to remember kind of which goes with which. Okay, because we know the tribes of Israel. So there, I'm sure, like everybody, there's some of them we tend to forget, who they are, where they came from. The whole saga between who was fertile, who wasn't fertile, who God was allowed to have children when he closed up the womb, while allowing someone else to have kids, and taking matters into their own hands, and having a kind of a maidservant take over and having a kid for you, and just back and forth. What a family thing. Can you imagine reunions at this time?
What happened to kids 5 through 8 of Leah?
5, 6, 7, and 8. Yeah, there was no easy way for me to do that, so I was like, let me just do this, and
How would Dinah, is she considered Jewish?
yeah, well, we'll get to Dinah.
Your graphic makes it look like a carnival tent, and that's probably
Oh, interesting.
It was a carnival, yeah. It was a circus show.
So, and kind of keep in mind as you're reading Scripture, especially the Old Testament, and you're getting the tribes of all the tribes and all the stuff that goes along with them, imagine this dynamic. Because this right here is what's going to cause a lot of their issues, because they come from different mothers, they have different feelings about things, they're always going to be bickering with one another. This is why. Okay? So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going there, because we have two brothers from the same mother who bicker all the time. Imagine having all of these kids from different mothers. It just gets ugly. Okay?
Very dysfunctional family.
Where all the current soap operas started.
Yeah, absolutely. So we left off where I think it was in verse 25 of chapter 30, where Jacob now is trying to figure out, he's trying to separate himself from Laban. Okay? So let's pick up in 25, and I don't have my Bible. Would somebody like to read that one just read the rest of the chapter? Thanks.
After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages, and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you, and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied, "but if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages. And my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on my wages, you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored will be considered stolen." "Agreed," said Laban, "let it be as you have said." That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself, and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals, so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones to Jacob. And this way the man grew exceedingly prosperous, and came to own large flocks, and maidservants, and menservants, and camels, and donkeys.
What a very odd story.
Very innovative.
Okay.
Did you guys watch that kind of stuff in high school? Where I'm from, we had to sit and watch and learn about that kind of stuff.
Like how to make spotted animals?
Like, you know, like all kind of fun stuff.
Oh.
Like,
No, we didn't go through that stuff at our school.
We had a couple of camels and donkeys at our school.
Really? Well, that was back in the day, so it may have probably. So, okay, so what questions or thoughts do you have on this section? Because I'm sure there's got to be some questions here.
Laban said he used divination, so that doesn't sound.
Did he bring out his
following
rods?
God.
Yeah, very, very weird. Yep. Yeah, did he bring out his rods? He was doing something. I mean, was this of God? Was this not of God? What, I mean,
it's just breeding sheep. That's what they did. I mean, whether maybe there was something in the bark that attracted those animals to that spot, because we're talking about animals, you know, not humans. They don't have emotions or cognitive motivations that, you know, cause them to do what they do. They're animals. So
yeah.
to breed a dog, people breed dogs all the time and just make two mate and have a puppy. You know, it's like.
So do you think the sticks had anything to do with it?
No,
They did.
They did.
They did.
I think it was God.
There was a theory that the sticks were a certain color that caused the animals to mate. And that's what they believed, you know, but it seems unlikely.
Yeah, he was bringing in some old, some tradition, some almost like divination, if you want to put it in that category, into this whole story. When I was studying this, what I got out of this is we're seeing a progression with Jacob. And we're seeing that he never, at this point, he hasn't gone to Yahweh yet. He's still relying on his own means, on his own ways, old traditions, and he's really not relying on God yet. And we're going to see in the next few chapters, man, does it change with him. So he is using some old ways, these old wives' tales on how to make your spots do, or animals do certain things with their colors. But it was very interesting that he came up with this plan. And why did he come up with this plan for the spotted animals? What was the whole idea behind
What's
that?
the motive? That's,
You could visually look and see which ones belong to you, so there should be.
Yeah. So he's trying to separate himself now from Laban. And he's like, look, I have done all that you have required of me. It's been 14 years. I now have 2 wives. I'm done. I want to go in my own way. And he understands, Jacob knows that when he got there, he didn't have anything. But he did make Laban very profitable, very rich. And Laban even knows it because he not acknowledges that, hey, your God has helped me in all of this. And so now Jacob is going, look, because we did this, we need to come up with some understanding and allowing me to leave, as I'm going to take some things with me. And so Jacob comes up with this plan. Look, over the next time period, all the spotted ones, all the weird ones are going to come with me. You keep all the pure colored ones. And we'll just make a nice little separation when the time comes. Laban says, that's great, because he knows God's going to bless it no matter what happens. You know, but what's funny is Laban in his own mind is still trying to deceive Laban, because he works his own, and he tries to work these animals in such a way to make his flock even more so than Laban's flock. And so his start growing. And we're going to see kind of how that all transpires with Laban's son in the next chapter. Okay? But just note through all of this is that in no way did the bark, the white stripes, have anything to do with making an animal striped like that, or spotted, or anything. Okay? And what Jacob finally will learn later on is he acknowledges that. So he acknowledges at some point that, okay, Yahweh, you're the one who did all this. And so we will eventually see that transpire. What I found very interesting, so if we take Laban's name, it actually means white. Okay, and so all the white sheep go to Mr. White. And I put with the candlestick in the library. It's just kind of interesting that's how his names kind of went out. So sheep were, and what's interesting, they're usually pure white, and goats were normally dark. So I guess since they were kind of normally like that anyway, I can understand why Laban would agree with this, because that's normally how things go. He goes, well, I'm going to do well with all this because that's how they multiply anyway. So
And the speckled ones and the striped ones are considered defects or something, or what's the significance between the speckled and the stripes and the non? And it was his motive to say, kind of get back at him, like I'm gonna get more lambs, in a
as
spiteful
of
way.
right now, there is no difference. It was just a way for visually seeing how to split things up. Later on, when we get into the sacrificial system, they do kind of consider that a defect, because they need a pure, like if you've been listening to the news about the red heifers, have you heard anything along those lines? The red heifers going to Israel, they're coming from Texas. If there is one speck of hair that is not red, that is a defect. They will not take it out. It has to be pure red. And so when we've sent them, I think 3, if our memory is right. So it's very interesting what's going on. But not only did they separate the animals, they actually separated like 3 days' journey from each other. And so we really wanted to kind of keep this separation happening between him and Laban during this time.
Wasn't that kind of sneaky on Laban's part? He took all the dark ones so that they wouldn't be there to possibly breed and get. Isn't that sneaky?
Yeah, well, they're both, yeah, it is. Because they're both very similar to one another. Yeah. So it's just very interesting, this whole ordeal. But anyway, anything else out of here? Whatever happened, however this Jacob did, God still blessed him. Even though he did not seek God out, God still blessed and multiplied his flock. Because God was doing this mainly because of Abraham's faith and what he promised Abraham. At some point in this transaction with Jacob and God, it will become Jacob's faith at some point. And we will see that here in the next couple chapters.
The thing that interests me here is that Jacob's about 84 years old. A little more, about 90 years old when this happens. So what I don't know, I was trying to figure out. I mean, the thing is 84. He has these 84 has these kids. And what I don't understand is between we're in verse 25, which you just read, all the way through when they're here in 31. How much time has lapsed? Another 6 years? Because it goes from 14 to 20. You'll say that in verse 31 here pretty soon.
Yeah, so the next couple chapters will span him going from 84 to roughly 100.
Yeah.
Because he's roughly 100 whenever he meets up with his brother. So that kind of gives you some kind of an idea what kind of time span that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's wild how old he is and how all the stuff that's happening and whatnot. So I don't know what the time frame is. It's enough time frame, at least, for some flocks to multiply. However long that takes. Anything else in that chapter before we move on to 32? Okay, well, let's go to 32. Or 31, I'm sorry. I just want to skip 31. It's 31. 32, I really like 32. Chapter 31. Okay, so there's kind of an interesting pattern here with Abraham and Jacob going on here with some fleeing and kind of and those things. We're seeing another pattern of separation happening. God is pushing him off to get away from things, and this is going to be a faith journey for Jacob during this time, because he's going to leave, and God is telling him to go back to his homeland. Where he's headed, who's out there? Esau. And what did Esau say right before Jacob left? I'm going to kill you. He just left Laban, and what did he do to Laban? He fled. Because he kind of cheated him to some degree. God bless this, but in that he kind of cheated him. So now he's got someone else he's kind of made mad. So he's kind of put himself in a very awkward and sticky situation here. Okay? So let me just do this because I'm going to switch it. Because we will get to, you'll kind of see where he left. So he's way down here in Beersheba, and he's going to leave, or he left and went all the way to Haran, which is in the next one. And then what we're going to see is that then he's going to come back. Okay? So we'll leave it there. 31. Let's read, I know it's long, but it's all one big part of it. 1 through 21. Would somebody like to read that? Come on, you're going to read 20 verses. Okay. 21.
Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what belonged to our father he has made all this wealth. Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly toward him as formerly. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field and said to them, I see your father's attitude, that it is not friendly towards me as formerly, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. However, God did not allow him to hurt me. If he spoke thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flock brought forth speckled. And if he spoke thus, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock brought forth striped. Thus God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. And it came about at the time when the flock were mating that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats which were mating were striped, speckled, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. He said, lift up now your eyes and see that all the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. Well, Rachel and Leah said to him, do we still have any portion or inheritance in our father's house? Are we not reckoned by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and has also entirely consumed our purchase price. Surely all the wealth which God has taken away from our father belongs to us and our children. Now then, do whatever God has said to you. Then Jacob arose and put his children and his wives upon camels, and he drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had gathered, his acquired livestock which he had gathered in Padan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. And when Laban had gone to shear his flock, then Rachel stole the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was fleeing. So he fled with all that he had, and he arose and crossed the Euphrates River and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead.
Perfect. Thank you. We can stop right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are some kind of big things that you see out of here, or questions that you may have?
It's like the guidance comes from the Lord, because here we can clearly see the angel has given an idea.
Yeah.
That's the reason he was doing some weird stuff.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So God is with him, kind of still showing that he's still with him. You know, so he's coming to him and giving him some direction. So we're kind of seeing that kind of start to take place. That's going to get even bigger as we go along.
Didn't Abraham take the speckled goats between him and, or sheep or whatever they're?
It wasn't said on that. Mm-mm. But they did separate the flock. But it didn't say anything about them being speckled. But there is definitely a connection there between the two.
What's interesting to me, we just read before this, was that they agreed, you know, what can happen. But then all of a sudden his sons, you know, is there something here, demonic starting? I don't know, that's for strife, I don't know. Because I mean, clearly, at this point he was in the right, but yet they're accusing him of something that was agreed by the father, by Laban.
Yeah, so, and we know their character from a previous story too. Because they're the ones that went in and filled in the water wells and was doing all kinds of stuff and so their character hasn't changed at all. And I think what was going on, they were seeing Jacob's flocks were multiplying way faster than their dad's. And they're like, look, something is fishy here. Because now you're interfering with us, not just my dad, because this is our inheritance and we don't like this. So we're going to go tell this story to my dad that, hey, he's doing something fishy here. And Laban takes it hook, line, and sinker.
Well, there's a legal concept, I hate to do this, but there's a legal
Always the lawyer.
issue. That's hearsay. You got all these people saying stuff, And the way it's written, you can't tell if it's true or not. And so you have to be really careful when you read through this to try to figure out who is saying what, whether they're reporting something they heard somebody else said, and so forth. So what you, really all you can come out of it to me is that God is leading him to do something. It may not be true that all these sheep were this way or that, or how they were, how they came to life, where, when, but God is leading here. You know,
Absolutely.
you know that.
Yeah. Well, and God knows that the strife is beginning. And that's why he's like, hey, Jacob, it's time for you to leave. Because he knows what's happening with the brothers. He knows everything that's going on. He says, okay, now's the time. Now you need to pack it up, and now you need to get. God's protecting them in that sense, getting them away from this family because they're toxic. What I find interesting is the reply of Rachel and Leah. How did they respond?
Do we get some too?
Let's go.
Where's our inheritance?
They were like, hey, what our fathers sold us, basically, gave us nothing of our inheritance.
Used everything you got.
What's the point? What's the point in staying here?
There's no mutual trust at all.
No.
Even between members of the same family.
So it really shows the disunity, the dysfunction of everything that was going on within this family, where his daughters are just saying, let's go. And they're ready to pack up. And I think it's pretty funny that Jacob goes through and he explains everything to his wives on what. And by the first thing I wrote down here, Jacob is a very smart man. He consulted his wives. Okay, he did not make a move until he went and talked to them. Okay, but he explained the case to them. This is what's happened. He changed my pay many times. He messed with me all these times. This is what your father did to me. Now this is what God has said. And then they're like, let's do it. So then they go, and then what Rachel does is very interesting. Why would she do this? And when I say this, I mean stealing his idols. Any ideas? Huh?
Could be a lot of different reasons.
Could be. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation on why she took them. Let's talk through them. What are some?
She didn't like what he was doing.
Okay.
She thought maybe he would go back to those, to get information that pursued her.
Maybe she was an idolatress.
Yeah.
She wanted.
Yeah, so here's several of them, and you've hit on them. I'm just going to read through them. To keep her dad from worshiping false gods is what one certain. I was like, I don't know if I buy that one. She thought it was part of her inheritance, and it was owed to her since she didn't get anything.
That's the ding, ding, ding,
Okay.
ding.
She was getting back at her father for everything that she did, and there could have been all of these could have been tied in.
Yeah.
There were actually some tablets found. They're called Nuzi tablets, and that they actually said that whoever owned the idols are the ones that owned all the possessions. So in her mind, if this was the case, she was stealing the idols, making Jacob more elevated than Laban, and he would then get the inheritance of all of Laban's flocks too. So she was kind of taking that into her own hands. And then the last one I put here, that she herself had a desire to worship these gods. No matter what the case is, it does still show us Rachel's heart compared to Leah. Okay? Rachel, in my mind, was never the one that God was going to choose. Okay, he knew her heart. He knew, but God still used her, even in the plan.
Actually, I come from the land of idol worshippers, so it's very common trait among idol worshippers. They steal each other's idols. It shows the mark of power.
Power, yeah. These are some actually that were found in the land of Canaan, if you want to kind of get an idea of what they look like.
Definitely looks like something worth worshiping.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah, it's something you want to bow down to and do all that. So, yeah.
Well, it makes sense that she would have been saying, you stole from me to her dad, and I'm taking what I think is my right.
My inheritance, and absolutely.
Is that the fertility one maybe, that one, is that a baby on the left hand?
This one right here,
Yeah.
it's still just kind of a woman. It's just kind of chiseled out, you know. I mean,
Okay.
so because you kind of see the woman here, but I don't know if that was fertility. They were just found these little gods. That's how they handle them, and they were small enough to take. It's not like they were some big, huge statue, kind of a deal. So very interesting.
Very provocative.
One other thing that you have to keep in mind, at least I have to keep in mind, is what is his name?
Is this one there?
Who's
Supplanter.
who's that? Jacob?
Jacob. I mean, the whole thing starts out with him being, that when maybe God changed his heart.
on this because this is our,
He,
or whatever.
there's nobody here who's without
And then everybody
a certain amount of perfidy and lies and cheating and stealing was kind of all over the place.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's, and honestly, it was heel catcher also is kind of what his name means, and so his whole name is all about that, and it's his character. God knew who he was going to be before he was even born, kind of a deal.
One thing to note though, whenever they talked to God or whenever they consulted God, he really honored them and blessed them for that.
Blessed them for what?
For consulting him, for
Oh.
saying like for example, like Rachel, I think there was one place where it was like Rachel turned to God or where was it in 30? There was a specific example within 31 about, or maybe that was in 29,
About
about
the
mandrakes.
twins?
No, it was about mandrakes.
Oh, the
and having
mandrakes.
a child or something.
Oh.
Mhm.
And one of the women specifically asked God to bless her, and he did. As soon as God came onto the scene, he was blessed.
Yeah, Leah.
And even in this 30, you know, when we see that Jacob is about to honor what God told him to do in the dream, you know, he's going to get blessed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and thing is, God's blessing is on them really kind of unconditionally to an extent on here, because it's through Abraham is why he's doing this. But what we always see through the patriarchs, they will do that, but there comes a point in their life when they have to make that separation, and it has to become their faith. They can't rely on someone else's faith to move forward, and we're going to see that with Jacob. That's not unlike our own faith. At some point in time, we have to rely on God alone, not our own understanding, not our own ways, but God. Okay?
And it also, all of this shows, it's like God is saying, I'm going to show you why I need to send my son, to cure sin. It's all over the place, and whatever they do, they need the salvation that comes from God through Christ.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's basically that's what everything's leading to in the Old Testament, even the Torah. So, yeah, that's everything. So, okay, so let's read 22 through. That's a long section. 22 through 35. Would somebody like to read that one? Robert, would you do that?
On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban, the
Yep, perfect.
at night and said to him, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead, and Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? You deceived me and carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You've done a foolish thing. I had the power to harm you, but last night the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods? Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there was anything of yourself, of yours here with me, and if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent, found Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing. Rachel said to her daughter, "Don't be afraid, my lord, but I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period." So she searched but could not find the household gods.
Yeah, we'll stop right there.
So, yeah,
Wow. Okay, so let's table that where we just read. Let's get back to the beginning here. Okay. So Jacob has left for 3 days before Laban really finds out with everything that's going on. And in that 3 days, he's gotten to roughly 300-mile head start. So he's gotten a good little distance from him. But he did catch up to him in Gilead. Okay. And what I find very interesting in this story is that God talks to Laban. God does talk to not his people. God will speak to whomever he wants to speak, not just because we're Christians, not just because we're his children. If God wants to talk to somebody, he's going to talk to somebody. And Laban was at least smart enough to realize who was talking to him to some degree. I don't think he fully understood it, but it was enough to get his attention. Because Laban had one thing on his mind, and God says, "Bud, let me tell you, you're not going to lay a hand on him." And Laban was like, "Ooh, probably, okay, all right, I got the picture here." Okay. Then he approaches Jacob. He finally catches up to him, and I just think it's funny because he's like, I didn't get to say bye to my daughters. I didn't get to kiss my grandchildren. Oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, really? That's what you're upset about? Kind of as I'm reading this. Okay. But what he's most important about is what comes up later. Why did you steal my gods? This is what was on his mind. And I wrote down here, I was like, I think it's pretty funny that what kind of gods are worthy to be worshipped if they can just be stolen? Good, not alive. And you can't worship them unless you've got this one little item there. It's like, yeah, that's something that we would want to worship. So anyway, he goes through this whole pity story, and he goes to Jacob and asking, "Hey, who stole it?" And Jacob's like, "I don't know what you're talking about, man. You can go search my entire camp, and whoever has it, you can kill them." That shows you he didn't know who had it, because if he knew Rachel had him, he probably wouldn't have said that. Okay? And so anyway, Laban goes all around. He can't find it. He finally comes to Rachel. Rachel was smart enough. Now this shows she has a little bit of her dad in her.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. So she takes the idol out of her tent, puts it in a saddlebag on her camel, and sits on the saddlebag. Then whenever he comes to her, and he says, "Sorry, Dad, I can't get up. It's my monthly time. I'm just going to stay put." And he's like, "Oh."
genius.
Enough said, I'm moving on. Because even if it was the case, it still would have been defiled because of if that was what was truly going on, because of her monthly period. So even if, he probably wouldn't have wanted the idol anyway at that point, because it would have been defiled, and that probably would have just set him off anyway, even worse. So this shows her heart, it shows her cunningness in herself and all this. So honestly, it's pretty brilliant plan in my mind. So it tells us that she's also not dumb.
And also it tells us she's afraid she might die. I mean, she realizes it's a bad thing she's done.
Absolutely. And she knows what she's done. Okay? And she's probably grinning ear to ear just watching her dad do all this. So let's read what happens after this. 36, let's read 36 through 42. Here, I'll read it. Then Jacob became very angry, and he challenged Laban. "What's my crime?" he demanded. "What have I done wrong to make you chase after me as though I were a criminal? You have rummaged through everything I own. Now show me what you have found that belongs to you. Set it out here in front of us, before our relatives, for all to see. Let them judge between us. For 20 years I have been with you, caring for your flocks. In all that time, your sheep and goats never miscarried. In all those years, I never used a single ram of yours for food. If any were attacked and killed by wild animals, I never showed you the carcass and asked you to reduce the count of your flock. No, I took a loss myself. You made me pay for every stolen animal, whether it was taken in broad daylight or in the dark of night. I worked for you through the scorching heat of the day and through cold and sleepless nights. Yes, for 20 years I slaved in your house. I worked for 14 years earning your 2 daughters and then 6 more years for your flock. You have changed my wages 10 times. In fact, if the God of my father had not been on my side and God of Abraham and the fearsome God of Isaac, you would have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen your abuse and my hard work. That is why he appeared to you last night and rebuked you. Pretty tough little speech here. I think Jacob's getting a little tired of how he's being treated.
20 years.
20.
That shows like, at the time of Joseph's birth, he should be in 90s.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's definitely in his 90s. Yeah. So he makes the case that, you have done everything bad to me. And now you're doing this. Put your case out here. I'm done. And what's funny is we're seeing a different Jacob now. Because Jacob's starting to stand up for himself.
He's also talking about God. He's bringing his God into the picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our God.
So we're starting to kind of see him come to fruition, come to be who God wanted him to be all along, which is what all of this, and what God even says it to him, is through all of this, basically, I'm making you into the ruler. Because he left very sheepishly. He was scared of his brother. He wasn't an outdoors guy. Now look at him. There's something different about him. So even through all of this tough 20 years that he spent with Laban, God was building him.
You can say because of.
Absolutely it was. And so when I was looking through this, I was like, how many times do we in our lives, when we go through hard times, are we like, God, where are you? What are you doing? Why am I going through all of this? And it took 20 years for Jacob to finally kind of start to get a sense of some of this stuff. And probably it was even a little longer. Okay? So just because it seems God is not there does not mean he's not working in your life. He's not building something up within you. Remember that. Because we're quick to blame him for the bad things in our life. But we're also very quick to immediately go to him during the bad times sometimes versus praising him for the good times. We're very weird people. Very weird children of his. Any other things in that section that you want to mention before we move on?
Actually, in King James Version, like in verse 24, it says Laban the Syrian. Actually, it's Arami in Hebrew.
Aramean, yeah. I kind of looked into that, but it just kind of lets them know kind of the area of where he was and that he was separate. That's kind of what I got. I didn't dig too much into that one. But yeah, it is. I did read the King James Version, and that was interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, let's finish this chapter then. It's 43 through 55. Would somebody like to read that one?
Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us." So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegar-sahadutha, and Jacob called it Galid. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today. That is why it was called Galid. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, 'May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me.'" Laban also said to Jacob, "Here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set up between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and pillars to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us." So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home.
Okay. Any thoughts on this little section?
They came to an agreement.
Laban kind of still over his daughters, like he can't take their wives.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think in the book of Jasher, he died because he wrote this oath on this place.
Who died?
Laban.
Laban?
Go on.
Yeah, I didn't go into that aspect of it. What I found very interesting is how quickly Laban just all of a sudden said, "Oh, okay, I got it," because he was just humiliated right in front of his entire family and all of his servants, because Jacob just laid out all of these offenses that he did to him in front of everybody, and now Laban goes, "Okay, we're going to back off now. I know who your God is. We need to make a treaty. We need to make a covenant with one another. And we're going to do this to protect ourselves." Because I think Laban understood who he was and who his God was. And he didn't want to have anything to do with that. So now they put up these piles of stones, these pillars, and they say, over there is you, over here is me. We're going to make this covenant. And what's funny is Laban even calls on his God and says, "You're God of Abraham, and you're God of this, and this is what you're going to do. And we're going to stay on each side, and we're going to kind of keep this peace treaty between us."
It's like a total divorce. It's no intermarriage. You stay over there, we'll stay over here. I don't want your people over here. I mean, it's a east versus west thing.
Yeah, absolutely. They were making that separation. And God was making that separation.
Is that Abraham's father's name, Nahor?
Terah.
I think it's his grandfather, I think, is it, if I remember right? Yeah, because I didn't look into that, but I want to say it was his grandfather, if I remember right. But I could be wrong on that one. But they made a sacrifice. We know they made a sacrifice, and went through the whole process of a covenant because they ate together. So they went through this was a legal contract between them, and so and they set that up. Anything else in there? That word Mizpah, which is a watchtower, and since the Lord was going to be keeping watch over them, keeping each other true to their terms of the covenant, is really kind of where that term comes from. So it was God that was going to be kind of watching over everything.
Not the name of God where it says the name of the fear of his father, I think. It's capitalized in that.
Fear, right.
Yeah, I didn't look into that. If somebody wants to look into it, I didn't look at the term for that one. So somebody might know that one. Fear of the. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think he understood, and that's kind of why I thought, he really came to his senses on some things. So anything else? Because that 32 is a big chapter. We don't know if we might be able to get to some of this.
Well, 55 is a really cool verse, but it says, "In the morning Laban arose and kissed his granddaughters and his daughters and blessed them." So that was a big goodbye.
He knew this was his last time he was going to see him. This is it. Yeah. So, yep. And he meant it. So he's going to put this one issue behind him, literally, with Laban, and now he's about to go into the next one in front of him. Okay? So,
which is more serious.
Much more serious. This is a bigger one, and Jacob knows it's bigger, because how we see Jacob handle this is very interesting. So let's read 32, because I think we can cover quite a bit of this. In 32, he says, "As Jacob started on his way again, angels of God came to meet him. When Jacob saw them, he exclaimed, 'This is God's camp.' So he named the place Mahanaim. Then Jacob sent messengers ahead of his brother Esau, who was living in the region of Seir in the land of Edom. He told them, 'Give this message to my master Esau. Humble greetings from your servant Jacob. Until now I have been living with Uncle Laban, and now I own cattle, donkeys, flocks of sheep, and goats, and many servants, both men and women. I have sent these messengers to inform my lord of my coming, hoping that you will be friendly with me.' After delivering the message, the messengers returned to Jacob, reporting, 'We met your brother Esau, and he is already on his way to meet you with an army of 400 men.' Jacob was terrified at the news. He divided his household among the flocks and herds and camels into 2 groups. He thought if Esau meets one group and attacks it, perhaps the other group can escape. All right. We'll stop there for a second. So he remembers and knows the rift between the two. He's now trying to start making restitution to some degree. So he sends out a slave humbly greeting, I need to come to you with my face on the ground. He's trying to appease his brother.
Hey, long time no see, buddy. How's the luck?
Love you.
Got some stuff.
I've acquired all these things. So he's kind of throwing that out there a little bit right now, letting him know I have acquired some things. Okay. Esau then, he says, okay, 400 men, we're going to meet my brother. So Jacob hears this. Now again, he hasn't consulted God in any of this. He comes to this fruition and is like, you know what? Here's what I got to do. Guys, we need to split 50-50. One of you may die, but one of you may live. Had to have been really good feeling towards one of the groups, But I'm doing this to preserve myself and preserve my family. Because if Esau's coming to 400 men, they're going to kill us. They're going to kill somebody. So might as well just be half of us. Smart plan, actually. But it still shows that he's trying to do things on his own. His mind and his heart is still not there devoting and waiting on God. God has already told him a promise that I'm going to protect you. Okay? So he's still acting out of this fear, still trusting in himself. And we'll see how this plays out. Anything else in there before we move on?
I think it's kind of interesting to think about all these years that he has fought about this and about what he has done. And so it's not like it just went away, So to me, there's some right fear that he has. He should be afraid,
Yeah.
Even though God has promised him that he knows that he also was the one that deceived his brother and caused him harm. So I think it's okay.
Yeah, I don't blame him for what he... Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I didn't mention, this whole angel idea, meeting him there, when he was leaving the area, he saw angels. So it's almost like when he was leaving the area, there were angels, and now when he was coming back into the area, he's meeting angels again. Some people think that these were angels that were parked there kind of as protection during this time, where like after the fall or something, that angels might have been as a border protection area. I don't know if that's the case. But it is interesting that he met angels at almost the exact same place as he was coming back in. So, very interesting. Let me see here. What else was here? Okay. Verse 9, he does turn to God. So we are seeing him starting to make that transition. Let me see. He goes, "Oh, my God of my grandfather Abraham, God of my father Isaac, oh Lord." And let's read 9 through. Actually, I'll just read the rest through 21, 9 through 21. Then Jacob prayed, "O God of my grandfather Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, you told me, return to your own land and to your relatives, and you promised me, I will treat you kindly. I am not worthy of all the unfailing love and faithfulness you have shown to me, your servant. When I left home and crossed the Jordan River, I owned nothing except a walking stick. Now my household fills 2 large camps. O Lord, please rescue me from the hand of my brother Esau. I am afraid that he is coming to attack me, along with my wives and children. But you promised me, I will surely treat you kindly, and I will multiply your descendants until they become as numerous as the sands along the seashore, too many to count." I'm going to stop there, because this prayer is probably one of the greatest prayers of his life. Because this was a defining moment in his relationship with God, I think. He now is on his knees, and I can just picture him pleading with God. Not only pleading, what I really love about this prayer is he reiterates what God has already told him.
Reminds God of his promise.
Of his promise. There is nothing wrong. God knows what he's promised you. But there's something about reiterating it ourselves that helps it get into our thick skulls. And if God has given us promises, and let me tell you, this book is riddled with promises for each and every one of us. And the only way that we know them is if we read it and know it. And at those times, whenever we go in prayer with God, we can take verses out of Scripture, kind of as what Glenn has been talking about. Say those to God. God, this is what you promised. Now come through. And that's exactly what Jacob did. This was a very heartfelt prayer. I do have a feeling he was in fear of his ever-loving life right now. And the only place he knew to go to was God. You could almost say being this fearful was almost untrusting of God. But that's just who we are. God knows that. Okay? So what he did was the right thing, was go to him and ask him. Okay? Humbly. I mean, what a wonderful prayer he just said. Okay?
It's like a surrender, because he acknowledges that he's unworthy, and he asks God to save him. He realizes he can't do it himself, and there's no external riches or wealth or exchange that can, justify him before God.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, as I was saying earlier, we absolutely see a progression of his faith here. It comes to fruition at the end of this chapter. Okay? So let's see what plan Jacob comes up with now.
You can also say, it says, but you said, I will surely do you good, and will make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. He's worried that there's going to be a big battle, and people are going to be killed, and he's saying, you've got to protect me, God. You've got to be with me.
Absolutely.
So he's really reaching out for protection.
Yeah, absolutely he is. He goes, how can this promise be true if you don't come through on this? So I think it's great that he remembered all this for him. In 13, let's read. Jacob stayed where he was for the night. Then he selected these gifts from his possessions to present to his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 female camels and their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. He divided these animals into herds and assigned each to different servants. Then he told his servants, go ahead of me with his animals, but keep some distance between the herds. He gave these instructions to the men leading the first group. When my brother Esau meets you, he will ask, whose servants are you? Where are you going? Who owns these animals? You must reply, they belong to your servant Jacob, but they are a gift for his master Esau. Look, he is coming right behind us. Jacob gave the same instructions to the second and the third herdsmen and to all who followed behind the herds. You must say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, look, your servant Jacob is right behind us. Jacob thought, I will try to appease him by sending gifts ahead of me. When I see him in person, perhaps he will be friendly to me. So the gifts were sent on ahead, while Jacob himself spent the night in the camp. So Jacob, after just saying this prayer to God, he comes up now with this plan to appease his brother. Okay? We don't know if this is a plan God gave him or if he just decided to do this on his own. What I do like about it, though, is he didn't just sit there and wait on God. Sometimes we're called to just do something. I've met several people in my life who lost their job, and I kid you not, stayed home on their couch, kept praying to God to provide them a job, but did not go out searching for one. Okay, God does require action on our part, especially if he hasn't given us any direction. He just says, go, do something. I'll direct you. I'll do whatever. So keep that in mind. Jacob saw this and he's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Okay, he trusts God in this matter, but he takes these animals, he separates them into lots with some separation between them. I don't think each servant knew. They thought Jacob was right behind them. Okay, so they all did not know what was really going on, even themselves. So the first one goes off and says, okay, here you go, Esau, Jacob's right behind me. Then all of a sudden, now they're looking back and here comes another set of flocks. This flock is behind me. Where's Jacob? And then he says, Jacob's right behind me. And then the next one, and then the next one, and it's wave after wave of these animals. And it's very interesting because these are some of the animals that Esau could have received as an inheritance on his own from his dad if he was the one. Okay? So I think Jacob's trying to buy him What I wanted to know, though, and I found it was very interesting, I was like, so what was the true cost of this? I mean, to them, there's no true cost we could ever put to these animals because this was their livelihood. This was everything to them, okay? This is what made them who they were, okay? So when I put a dollar figure to this, the dollar figure actually means nothing. But in today's cost, this whole part of animals was about $260,000 worth of animals. So again, that doesn't even account for the livelihood and everything else that goes along with these animals. This was a big gift for Esau.
In exchange for his life, potentially.
Trying to, yeah, exactly.
I
Okay.
trust you, God, but I'm also going to throw $360,000.
And it- yeah, and if you want to do that in the bucket today, feel free to go ahead and just do that, you know?
I can't help but think that God was working in his heart to do all these things. After he prayed, he remembered his father's prayer over him, and he thought, I'm going to bless him.
Yeah.
And this was a change of heart right there on purpose.
Absolutely.
He was giving Esau his inheritance that he was due.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, and more probably. I don't know. You know, but yeah, it's. I mean, there's a lot going on in this scene, but he's really, Jacob's really. I really need to make sure Esau is good whenever I meet with him. Okay.
I'm not the jerk that I was before. I'm a new man. Here you go.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he's becoming a new man. He's going to be a little different before he meets him, though. We're going to stop there, though, because we're not going to get into who he wrestles with. Because it is almost time to go. Because there's a lot that I want to cover with that story. Let me tell you, it's a big event, and that's why I don't want to rush it. Okay? So you'll have to come back next week. There's my teaser. Okay? But what a great story that is. So get ready for it. All right, with that being said, prayer requests?